Welcome to The Human Element, presented by Whisk. I'm your host, Barb Biden, and in each episode, I sit down with CHROs and senior HR leaders to explore how AI, innovation, and human insight are reshaping the future of HR. We'll explore how technology is reshaping leadership, strategy, and the role of HR by sharing candid stories, practical ideas, and strategic perspectives to help you shape the future. The Human Element is brought to you by Whisk, the leader in agentic HR and creator of Harper, the world's first AI HR generalist. Learn how Harper can resolve up to 80% of routine HR tasks autonomously. Learn more about Whisk at whisk.com. Today on The Human Element, I'm joined by Maggie Ruvoldt, Chief People Officer at Learn Behavioral, a national leader in ABA therapy for children and young adults with autism. Maggie leads talent strategy, culture, and leadership development across a multi-state clinical organization. And she's been a very thoughtful public voice that I've enjoyed really listening to, especially on LinkedIn recently on workforce mental health, but also Maggie's takes on AI. I'm excited to talk with someone who is helping Learn scale with a mission-driven people strategy in autism care. So Maggie, it's so good to see you and welcome to the show.
It's great to see you too, and I'm so glad you're having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I am absolutely looking forward to this conversation. You've been exploring HR transformation at scale with your team. And when it comes to AI and how it affects work, what's the main misconception that you see out there?
I love this question. And I feel like I talk about this a lot. People are starting with the big shiny tools. What's the newest thing? What's the latest model? Gemini just improved, those kinds of things. And so I think the misconception is go find the right tool and implement it. And what we really need to be doing is thinking about how is the work getting done, and starting with the people and thinking about the change management. So the best tool in the world that your team doesn't use, that doesn't actually solve your problem, and you're not redesigning the work to make the most of the people as well as the tool, I think is where we're all getting it a little bit wrong.
Yeah, and worse than the best tool in the world, it's the danger of a whole bunch of layers of the best tools in the world, right? And so starting with the work is one way to help you ensure that you are selecting the right tools when it comes to that, for sure. And I think that is a take that we are not talking about enough, in my opinion. We're starting in a different place. And so I think that's super smart. And you've also said, which I love, that focusing on AI just to cut jobs is missing the point. We've had lots of guests who share that opinion. Can you explain why you see it that way?
Yeah, I think that is subtraction as opposed to exploration, as opposed to how do we get exponentially better? How do we just build better organizations? And so I think that you change what you measure, right? And so if what you're going for is measuring job loss, how many people can we get rid of? You're measuring the wrong things. I think if the metrics I would love to see people focus on are things like workflow impact. How many AI or automated workflows have you shipped? Automation coverage. Take a single workflow. What percentage of that is now being driven by an automation rather than by an individual? Although I would say that the favorite thing that I have that I think people should be focusing on is just fluency. There's this collective imposter syndrome that's going on. Every time I go to an event about this, everybody thinks everyone else is so much farther along than they are. And so I think if we begin to focus on what's the organizational team and individual fluency in what these tools can do, the impact they can have, and how can my job be more satisfying and better, and how can I work at the top of my capabilities? If you start to focus on that, people are going to embrace it in lots of ways. That's just going to make the organization and the work all better.
I totally agree. And when it comes to that collective imposter syndrome, everyone's speaking up and feeling the freedom to be authentic about where they really are, I think is so important, right? Like you sometimes can see people clam up in that situation. Somebody's talking about how far ahead they are. Others aren't sharing. And I think if we all really share our collective experience, we will get a much more real view of, practically speaking, where our fellow HR leaders actually are on this transformation journey.
Yeah. It's like the worst part of social media, right? We're watching everybody's curated version of where they are in HR,
Best of the
on
best,
AI.
only the best of the best.
That's what you're putting forward. I'm doing it too. It's what we're all putting forward.
I totally agree. So how do you think HR leaders should reframe the AI conversations then that they're having with their teams so that their teams do feel and see AI as an opportunity versus a threat?
One of the things that we did with one of our teams, where I feel like I've been the most successful in the conversation, is starting with, if I could wave a magic wand and I could make your job better in one way today, a repetitive process, a manual thing, where you feel you're not contributing to the top of what you are capable of and want to be working on, what does that look like? If you can have conversations with people about that, and then take that to, okay, if I take that away and I create capacity in your day, 1%, 5% capacity, what would you spend that time on? They can begin to imagine what the work is going to look like afterwards. If you start with, hey, here's this tool and it's going to make you more efficient. Boy, is that a super vague word. Or workforce reduction. Or even I'm guilty of saying, hey, we're going to do more work with the same number of people that we have. All they hear is more work. And it's not bringing people into the conversation about, help us reimagine your job. That's where I think as HR leaders, that's what we're good at, right? We're good at helping design terrific workplaces with wonderful cultures. That's where we can be leading this and making sure that what we're building for everybody is a better job experience. And think about all the discretionary effort you get when everybody's having a great job experience.
Yeah, doing things that they love doing instead of spending their whole day doing the dreaded things that they're going to give you when you give them that magic wand question and say, tell me what you would use this magic wand to have you not do moving forward. So like when you create then this additional capacity, I think there also becomes an opportunity in that capacity for upskilling of teams, right? To help them fill into those new roles and the new challenges that they might be able to take on with excitement. So what do you think upskilling looks like in practice once AI truly enters the workflow and creates space for people to be doing new things?
Yeah, I think the first place is it puts more empathy back into the work conversation, right? It gives, what are we best at as people? What do we bring? It's understanding other people's perspectives. It's bringing people together. And so it creates capacity for that. It creates capacity for creativity. The best companies that at innovation, they carve out specific time for people to try new things, to fail at those new things, to experiment. Imagine if actually all that we did with that capacity was to allow people to experiment and try new things and be better at their jobs. All of the innovation that could potentially create, that's a huge win for everybody.
Yeah, imagine being able to step back enough from the fray to truly reimagine what you would do if gifted with time. And it's not gifted with time and then complete that other work that you always have to do later. It's if we truly lifted that other work off of your plate and you really could reimagine what would that look like. And I'm curious whether you have any stories or within your own team or anything that you've seen where an employee or team really did embrace AI in this way and it truly made their work life better.
Yeah. So there's a company that I advised that I saw this happen in, and it was interesting because it was actually a team that was really resistant at first. So they had asked me for some advice because they had implemented a tool and they realized that the team wasn't using it for whatever reason. And it was because they couldn't imagine what their life was going to be like from a work perspective if they really engaged in this. And so we had the magic wand conversation, but I took it the next step and said, okay, and what was interesting about that, I thought, was the problem the company had solved for them was not their magic wand question. Where they felt like they needed help was actually not what the tool was solving. So that was one thing I thought was really interesting because they hadn't engaged the team. And then the next question I asked them was, if you had a day, if we told you could have one work day where there were no meetings, none of the work that you currently do needed to get done, we were going to move all the goals in such a way that we just created a day for you, what would you do with that day from a work perspective? And they started chattering very quickly about what their dreams were about proactive work that they never seemed to get to. The things they wanted to get ahead on, the sort of dream projects that they thought could have incredible impact. And they were talking about the impact they thought they could have on the customer experience. If I had a day, I could create I have this idea for this thing that would improve the customer experience. They all had one. And so we got them to think about, okay, I can't give you a whole day, but again, what if I gave you 1% of time back, 5% of time back, and really convince them, all right, we're not going to add more to your plates. What we're going to do is come back to us in 30 days, embrace the tool you've been given, let us know how much time it's saving you so that we can then say, okay, let's pick one of those projects that you were all excited about, and let's take the time you've saved and dedicate it to that project. And boy, did they embrace the tool, because they knew then what the prize was at the end of that. And it was really exciting to see them embrace it and hear what they're doing.
To see them imagine what they would be doing. And it's like gifting them with absolute freedom. I loved all the things you said that you'd take off, right? Like you don't need to worry about your goals. You don't need to worry about your task list. You don't need to worry about what we want you doing. Think of what would you reimagine. And that was just really powerful for me, and also exciting and a little sad too, that we have to think to remove all of those things from our poor team's plates, because they're so smart, right? And they have such great ideas, but they almost are working encumbered by this administrative work that they have to do, this repetitive work, the things that they would love to hand to AI. But there was something unique in how you talked about that felt like absolute freedom that we probably all wish we could give our teams a little bit more of. So getting a little more technical, not in the tool sense, but more in the automation and mapping. You've talked about running exercises to map tasks across teams so that you can look for those automation opportunities. What did you learn when you did that?
What I learned, first of all, I always learn, I'm incredibly impressed with how much work my team does. Whenever we walk their process.
Every time.
Yes. I can't imagine. You keep coming back
every
day.
You just
are
like, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So appreciate that. And how much effort goes into making something feel effortless to the employee. And that's what it's all about, is how do we make a great employee experience? The other thing I learned is just plugging a tool in. I thought what we'd be able to do is look at your workflow and find the place where automation was super obvious. And most of the time when we say AI, we actually just mean automation. And so I thought what we'd be able to do is just plug into places. Okay, you're doing that as a person. Let's put an automation there so you can stop doing that. What I found was the real power was, let's start with, walk me through the process. What's the end goal? What's the end product of that process? And allowing ourselves to say, okay, what if we didn't just follow the process? What if we thought about, what's the end goal do? What do the people do best? What does the automation do best? And how do we imagine a process that brings that together? And we come up with processes that don't look like the old ones, end up in the same place with the same or sometimes better quality. But that if all we did was plug in to certain spaces in an existing way, we wouldn't have ended up with the best place. And that to do that, sometimes you have to bring somebody in who doesn't do the process at all, who's like, why do you do it that way?
Fresh eyes. Yeah, fresh
Absolutely.
eyes who will ask any question.
Yep.
Any question.
No pride of authorship.
Yeah. Have you just used other internal folks? Have you used a facilitator? I'm just curious if another CHRO wanted to do something like this and workshop this with their team, like where should they start? Who do they bring in?
Sometimes we're bringing in people from other departments who are the customer of the process, or I think about every process in terms of I'm the customer of something, so I'm receiving on the other end, or the people who do the process are the customer of whoever comes in front of them, right? Because very few processes exist alone. It's usually you're getting an input from somebody else. So we look at both ends of the cycle. Who's the end customer and who am I the customer of when I start this process? And let's bring them in the room. Other times I've had a thought about, I think the right tool for this is somebody that we work with who has built some bots for us, or the Zapier team. So my team is doing a lot of discovery with Brandon's team at Zapier.
We love them.
They're just the best.
Yep.
And they're coming in and asking us all the right questions. I do think there's a bit of a gap of people you can bring in to facilitate this that isn't like the huge consulting hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollar engagement, that there's more smaller, discrete. And I'm still looking for that person. I know they're out there. Maybe they're listening. So I think we need more of those facilitators.
Totally. It sounds like you're wanting to keep it still agile, right? You are, in fact, trying to make the work better. So there is something, I agree with, like something about an overwrought, like over-architected process with which to consider this that just feels like it sucks all the inspiration out of the room. No offense to my friends in like large consulting companies, of course, but I'm sure they can be agile too. But it's like you want to keep the inspiration in this conversation, I feel like, with the teams, because it really is fun reimagining work. I think this is probably also why what leads you to your don't start with the tool first, start with the work first idea that you've talked about already.
And getting those tiny wins, because when they see one thing worked, they get hungry for more. And I'm also finding that teams are getting jealous with each other. Wow, that team just did that. I want to do that. That looks like it could be fun. It looks like my life could get better, all those different kinds of things.
Totally. Like getting a little competitive about that in a very fun sense, right? Like sharing ideas across teams as well, right? It's like a use case that worked for a marketing team and sharing that within the company in some way that the people team can see similarities in process and where they can use things that the marketing team has implemented towards something they're doing in the people group. I think there's plenty of opportunity for that kind of sharing.
Yeah, definitely.
I am excited to talk to you about this because I know we see eye to eye on this. I think that I led IT and security in addition to the people function in my last role. And in many companies, AI adoption is led by tech. You have argued, after my own heart, that HR should lead instead. Why do you think that?
I think because I don't want to lead with the tool. That's why I think tech should do this, because I believe that the magic is in the redesign of the work. It's got to be a partnership between HR and technology and HR and operations. And I love my friends in tech, and I come from a tech background in tech companies. It's the, hey, there's a shiny object and it's a hammer and everything looks like a nail kind of moment. That's why I think it shouldn't be coming from tech, because it's another tool that let's not let the tool drive the work.
I know. I feel like all roads lead back to your don't start with the tool first. Start with the work and implement the right tool. The whole, if you have a hammer, suddenly everything looks like a nail, and that's really not the case in many cases. What do you think it looks like when HR takes the lead on AI and actually shows the rest of the organization what's possible and what change looks like and all what adoption looks like and so forth? How do you imagine that?
I imagine, again, the job satisfaction goes up, that people get more excited about their work because we're designing the work in a way that's better. And I think when HR does it in our own teams, it creates a credibility. For me to walk into another team and say, here's the place in which you should automate it, and here's the process that you should go through, and here's how we're going to redesign your work. When I haven't done that with my own group, what credibility do I really have? And do we know enough to be going in? We have to build our own fluency. And AI is the one place, maybe there's other places like this, that when I think about all the ways in which I learn, it's the one place where you really have to do trial and error and do the different things. I can't just study for it. Like I can go learn the new labor laws by attending webinars and reading about them, and I don't have to do any hands-on work. AI, you have to really roll up your sleeves and figure out what works and what doesn't and lead the change management. And so why not start with our own teams to do that?
Totally. Do as I say, not as I do is usually a bad strategy in most instances. But I really think that there is this opportunity where folks look to HR teams as experts in change management. And so if we go first, experience the change first, and can assist and lead others through it, that there is some serious power. And that comes from credibility, but it also comes from empathy, I think, too, right? Like, how on earth, if we have not done it, can we empathize with their experience? And if you're not empathetic, how good are you going to be at leading others through a change that you don't understand?
And vulnerability, and saying, hey, by the way, here's the ways in which we got it wrong and what we learned. And we're not going to make those mistakes with your team because now we learned it frankly, making mistakes with our own.
I fully agree. I wonder if you have any other thoughts on the partnership with your CTO peers, your CIO peers. How can that trifecta of like the HR leader, the CIO, CTO work together to really be champions of this transformation?
Yeah. I think as with any change management, we have to be able to see it from each other's point of view. Right. So understanding what are we both charged with? What are we each bringing to the table? But I think the most important partnership, and this is true whether you're partnering with a technologist, whether you're partnering with somebody in the marketing department or operations, starting from what's our shared set of goals. I don't believe there are HR goals and IT goals and marketing goals. They're business goals. They're enterprise goals. How we each contribute to the achievement of those goals is we bring a certain amount of expertise. I often say I'm a business person who happens to do HR for a living. I feel the same way about my technology counterparts. You're a business person who happens to do tech for a living. So as business people, let's get together and figure out how we can each contribute to make this better for the enterprise. I think that's the best place to start the partnership.
And I think so many companies don't do as well as they would like to with cross-functional goals, just in general, right? AI aside, AI is also going to be such a great use case for finally teaching us how to have truly shared objectives across functions where we actually make sure that each part of the cross-functional partner knows like what we're doing, when they're going to do their parts, how do we communicate. I think for me anyways, I haven't seen cross-functional goals not be a pain point in many companies. So wouldn't it be cool if it also taught us how to solve that age-old problem at the same time? That'd be
Yeah.
good.
How do we all play better together in the sandbox?
Seriously. And starting with partnership at the top, I think is ultimately what you're talking about, right? Is that top level alignment, keeping our teams aligned and truly understanding to the best of our ability, everybody's roles and what their goals are, how they work, like just having that curiosity and shared understanding. So my next question could kick off an entirely new 30-minute podcast, I think, but let's see. So you have warned, and I do love this, you've warned about starting with talent acquisition when it comes to AI. Why do you think that's a risky first step?
Sure. So I believe that talent acquisition is the beginning of building company culture as you bring a new employee in. If that's the only place they're going to experience AI, that's a weird, jarring place to start. So I think that we have to be thinking most about what is the candidate experience, because the candidate experience is the employee experience. I also think I'm a little bit worried, I think everybody is, that we're just going to end up in talent acquisition with an avatar from the company talking to an avatar for the candidate, and we're not actually going to have the human connection that is important to think about how much time you spend at your job. That has to be a human connection. I think there are a lot of places within the talent acquisition process where there's great opportunity for automation, but as an organization, it's not where I'd start.
I like it, right? It's when you think about meeting someone for the first time in general and growing a relationship, that how much more powerful that true human connection, even like in-person connections in places where you can have them. And that makes sense to me from a talent acquisition perspective. You don't know that person yet. They don't know you. Don't you want to get to know them and be able to share your culture in a way that invites them in and is human before we interject some of the automation and so forth that can make things speedy. But I also love you're acknowledging there is work. I think that's why a lot of people go there. We're touching on this before we started, but that there's repetitive work in TA, right? So it's an obvious target, but I like your take is super fresh on how it's risky to get it wrong there. If you are getting it wrong with an employee who's already there and you're in this experiment together, like you don't want their experience to be bad, but like you're already in this experiment together, you're in this learning together, and you don't have that built with a candidate, I don't think.
You don't. And the early wins in TA, you started to hear these companies talk about, I don't even have recruiters anymore. And so that also reeks of headcount elimination and
Totally.
not about how do we improve the experience and how do we take the people who are great at this work and focus on what they're great at and automate the stuff that can be automated.
100%. I don't think you'd find a ton of people that would say recruiting processes are perfection, right? So it's like the classic, like you, if you throw a tool on that, congratulations, you have automated a process that everyone complains about worldwide, right?
Absolutely.
As an area that can be optimized. So I'm not sure that's a great win. So you have making my job super hard because I will say you take the prize. I try to do a few takeaways to leave viewers with. And I was done my few takeaways in the first few minutes. And I was like, we have to use these. And so there were a bunch more. So I'm going to leave listeners, they're responsible for getting the additional rest of the 10 things on the list on their own. So the first thing, my big pickup was starting with the people in the work, not the tool. That came up throughout our conversation multiple times. Could not agree more. And I loved your comment about using AI to reduce jobs is actually subtraction. And really, we can be using AI to create exponential improvement, exponential betterment. And I think thinking about that equation is really important. So I love that takeaway. And I'm going to go back to the magic wand question as my number 3. So it's asking your team, if I could hand you a magic wand and you could use that magic wand to make your job better, what would you be targeting? So pulling them into the mix on that, but then also asking them what they would do if unencumbered with the time and space that they've created. They don't have to think about goals. They don't need to think about what we want from them or anything. What would they go do instead? What would they reimagine? And that was just super powerful. No joke, that was probably in the first 3 minutes of our conversation. So this was a pretty awesome conversation that I really appreciate. We always like to leave guests with the last word, though, Maggie. First I want to actually, I'm going to give you 2. One is any tools, resources, things that you've really found helpful that you would point listeners at.
Absolutely. I mentioned we're doing some work with Zapier. So follow Brandon, follow Zapier and what they're doing in the space. They've been incredibly generous with that. I also took a number of courses on Coursera with Jules White from Vanderbilt, who really at the beginning of this year completely accelerated my own learning path. So those are 2 sets of resources I would check out.
Excellent. And the last word, if you had to give HR leaders who are just at the start of thinking about their AI journey, what is that piece of advice that you would offer them?
I would say pick up the magic wand and use it on your own job.
Yes, please.
Please. We all have the list of things that we would love to be able to not have to do again, or that sort of drag us down and where we're not necessarily doing that. So start, as much as I said, start with our own teams before we go to other teams. Start with yourself so that you can go to your team and say, hey, this is what I've done. Let me help you come along the journey.
I love it. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. This was a great episode. I think everyone's going to really love it and lots of good takeaways. So it was a pleasure.
I really appreciate the time and the conversation. It's given me a lot to think about as well.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us on The Human Element, presented by Whisk. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow The Human Element wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Barb Biden. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.